Hamilton wrote, the other 51. How do you ride like you're running out of time? Right day and night like you're running out of time. Every day you fight like you're running out of time. Like you're running out of time, or you're running out of time. How do you ride like tomorrow won't arrive? How do you ride like you needed to survive? How do you ride every second you're alive? Every second you're alive, every second you're alive.
Matt Vautour, welcome to the Other 51. Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thanks a lot. I've listened to many of the previous episodes. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. This is my first time, long-time listener, first-time caller guest. This is great.
I don't think I've ever said that, but that would be true here.
And it's continuing kind of a theme for this month, the A10 Writers Association reunion tour. We had Jensen on.
Could have come to Media Day and knocked a bunch of these out.
Yeah, right. I was realizing this. I never went to Media Day. I was thinking about it for the 5 years I was on the beat. I never went mostly because it was 6 hours from Olean, and I don't know. It was just like schedule wise, I never actually had the joy of never had Media Day joy.
Yeah, I don't know if I could say you missed out on that, but I don't know. Media Day has always been, for me, it's been more useful some years than others, but it's as much as anything a social activity, seeing some people I know and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how many beat writers are on the A10 beat nowadays? Because I was thinking about this just now when I covered Bonaventure 99 to 04, and you've been on UMass. You were on UMass that whole stretch. It was like everybody had at least 1 to 2 beat writers. Is it still like that, or has it shrunk since then?
You know what's interesting is the definition of who and what a beat writer is. Like, there's a lot more websites that cover the league, and so some different websites from different places, and so it's the traditional ones are certainly less, and it's harder to tell sometimes who is a pure beat writer from a traditional organization, because people travel less than they used to. So I certainly know some of them. The guys from Rhode Island I've known. Stu Durando from St. Louis is somebody I know, and he's their guy, and the guys in Olean, and so there definitely are some, but the Philly guys don't travel with the A10 teams anymore, so I see them in Philly, but not nearly as much traveling as that they used to.
But it's interesting that you point out how much that there are more websites covering teams now, and more kind of online media outlets, more like for lack of a better term, fan blogs going to stuff like that. So it's interesting to see, especially from a reader's perspective, kind of like the way A10 coverage has shifted from like being very you had your daily newspapers that you read every day on the beat, to now it's very much like a website league to follow. What's it like? I'm curious, what's it like from your perspective, being on the beat and being at a newspaper for all these years? What changes you've seen on that?
I think one of the things that's hard to tell with some of the websites is what to expect from them, and I think one of the things that's sort of tough with journalism that's online is knowing what sort of ethical standards and what sort of professional standards and from what point of view is someone coming from, and I think that's always I think that's a challenging thing, and it's not just the A10, it's not just college basketball, although college basketball is a nice microcosm for that, but like certain Bleacher Report has sort of evolved and changed in what to expect from it, and it's not always clear what's opinion and what's what's straight news coverage online. I think that's become it's become interesting, and I wonder sometimes if readers' expectations of me is different because of what they've seen from other outlets.
That's interesting. Have you actually heard from any readers who are on Twitter or traditional ways? Have their feedback, the feedback you've gotten from them, how is that different, and has that reflected any changes, do you think?
I think it's hard. Well, two things. One, I'm always careful not to let, especially on Twitter, let Twitter feedback influence me to think that that's everybody that's reading.
Sure.
And I think some people run into that problem and think that they're writing to Twitter. Mm-hmm. And I'm definitely I try not to do that the same way would try not to write to the message board people before. But I think what's become interesting, I think sometimes because of that direct interaction, and I definitely do interact with people on Twitter, sometimes they think that it's kind of an a la carte service, and they can ask, "Oh, write about this," or give me an answer to that, and it makes for kind of interesting interactions with some people.
I was thinking back on the A10 days and when we were covering, and you mentioned the message board people, and it's always funny to kind of see how, in a lot of ways, what we were dealing with message boards and stuff like that was such a precursor to Twitter and such a precursor to like a lot of the stuff that, you know, news side is dealing with like, you know, 4chan and Reddit, and certainly not a lot of the abuse and kind of vitriolic stuff that you're seeing there. But in terms of fans having, you know, message boards and the power they wielded, they were. It's funny to my students who a lot of them weren't born when I was or very young when I was starting out. When I was starting out on the beat, like to explain how important message boards were, especially to college sports. It's amazing to think
Sure.
back and to see like the Bonnie's bandwagon and like how influential that board was. And I'm sure you had boards for UMass that were similar.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of like Twitter has become life's message board,
right?
And not necessarily in a good way. I was thinking about that as I was thinking about coming onto this podcast, and how it's interesting how Twitter has changed things. And I wonder how many writers are thinking about the lines that they're going to write in something that they're covering even subconsciously in 140 character bursts, and how has the sentence structure and things changed because you think about fitting things into a tweet, and I don't know the answer to it, but I'd be curious even to look back at my own stuff just to see if maybe the structure of some of the things you're writing, because you're so used to, and so many people are trying so hard to be clever in that short span on Twitter that I wonder how much it's affected writing even subconsciously.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, you kind of, I think, and I've found this on the blog too, you find yourself, you know, subconsciously or after you write the line, you think, oh, that's the tweet line. Like that's the sentence I'm going to tweet out, or that's the thing that's the tweet of this story. And I do wonder if people are, you know, maybe like this is a great paragraph or I've built to something here. And now I kind of think kind of in more of those almost staccato like bursts of like that this is the quip that I can send out, or this is the line that people can send out about that. That would be an interesting study. I don't know how you would like you say, you can't necessarily quantify that, because I'm sure a lot of it, you're right, is subconscious. You don't really think that way, but it affects that way too. Man, we were, not to make this totally old white dudes thinking back on the 90s, but we were really blessed at our, I feel this, and maybe this is just, you know, the memory playing tricks on me, but it does seem like we had like a really special time covering the A10, just in terms of not just basketball, but in terms of like the characters involved and the stories involved, and I don't know if how does, I guess, from that perspective, the current crop of the A10 and the current A10 compare to the early 2000s, like the Martelli, Cheney, that era of the A10?
Well, I know for me, thankfully, when we mentioned Media Day before, I'm always making sure I get Martelli, because there isn't Mike Jarvis, there isn't John Cheney anymore, and well, there's a lot of intelligent coaches and interesting guys. I enjoyed listening to Shaka Smart talk about a whole lot of topics during his time in the Atlantic 10, but the the really colorfulness of somebody like John Chaney and Mike Jarvis and John Calipari at UMass, which is I covered John Calipari as a student, and that the A10 was it has to have been as interesting as it ever was in the mid and late 90s with some of the people involved. I think the basketball is still interesting. I think it's all from year to year. I'm always curious to see where the league fits in terms of where it is nationally and what kind of potential that it has. And some of the guys, I mean, Danny Hurley's still an interesting guy, and if you get him going in the right frame of mind, he'll definitely talk. And we're not that far removed from Rick Majerus being in the Atlantic 10, and he's definitely somebody that if you're trying to wind him up and you know which buttons to push, he was somebody you could do that with. And so he's missed in the on the character level, but they're interesting, but you have to kind of know where to go and where to dig a little bit more. Whereas with John Chaney, you could ask him about anything and get some sort of either a great story or just like saliva flying anger coming from him. And I remember John Chaney at a media day at the Spectrum in Philadelphia, and I was one of the first people over to him, so I put my recorder down in front of him, which I'm sure still had a tape in it at that point, before pre-digital recorders or pre-using cell phones for that kind of thing. And so I knelt down to talk to him so I wouldn't be like standing and looking down at him, and asked him one question. I don't remember what the question was, but people filled in behind me, TV people filled in behind me, so I couldn't stand up if I wanted to because there was a camera over my head, and John Chaney flew off the handle, and he is banging on the table, and there's saliva flying out of his mouth, and I can't duck, I can't dodge, I'm just in a position I can either put my hand up or just take it at that point, because there's nowhere to go, and I am riding this out until the storm is over, so to speak.
That's amazing. That's class. I mean, that's quintessential A10 right there. And I always remind myself too, for like every Chaney and Martelli greatness, we had Darrell Porter and we had Billy Hahn. So they were not all gems. And Jimmy Barron, one of my favorite coaches, but Jimmy was not Jimmy was on the other end of the Phil Martelli, John Chaney scale, in terms of quotability. So where a lot of places we could go next on this one, but that's what I wanted to ask. You mentioned Calipari. You covered him as a student when he was at UMass, and what was he like to cover, especially that point of his career, and as a member of the student media? What was Cal like? Well,
at least at the beginning, he was terrifying.
Okay.
Just in that, because he was such a presence, and certainly in little Amherst, Massachusetts, there was no bigger personality to ever be there regularly, and so it was always you didn't want to ask a stupid question, you didn't want to, you only got a little bit of time, so you didn't want to blow what opportunity you had, but on one end, it was a tremendous thing, because at that point, I covered the team for the Collegian in 94-95, which was the first time they were ranked number one. They had opened the season number 3 in the country, beat Arkansas in the first game, and so there were national reporters from newspapers all over the country. You'd see Dick Weiss there. Bob Ryan from the Globe was there regularly, and so these people, the John Feinstein, these people who were names on book covers or names in newspapers that you'd seen, or people that were on ESPN sports reporters, were there covering the same thing that we were, and so it was a great sort of education on the fly to compare what we were writing to what they were writing, and because everybody wanted a piece of Cal, and so he was not as polished as he is now, but even then one of the things I've always said about him is he goes into every interview, every press conference, knowing the answers to the questions before the questions are asked. He knows what he's going to tell you, and he'll frame the answer he wants to give to whatever question that you asked. But he's going to be on message regardless of what you want to know. And I think the really sort of gifted people in that respect do exactly that. And I haven't encountered anyone that's done it as well as effectively since then.
So just out of curiosity, how do people in Amherst and around UMass, how do they view Calipari now?
I would say most people like him. And I think there's certainly there are people that feel burned and feel sort of betrayed by the way things ended, but he was enough in the community and would be at the same restaurants that they were at, and he was out there and people got to know him, and everybody has a story about standing behind him at the registry of motor vehicles or seeing him picking up breakfast at someplace. And he especially at the beginning, he was eager for that interaction with people in the community, because he was trying to build something from nothing, because UMass was awful when he took it over. So I think people liked him as a man as much as anything else, and certainly enjoyed the ride. And I think the more time has gone on, I think that people look at that what happened with Marcus Camby taking money from an agent, and people don't really assign that blame to Calipari here. And they look at the contract he signed to go to the Nets, which was, I think, second only behind what Pat Riley was getting paid at the time in Miami, and realize that most people would have left for that money in all scenarios. And I think seeing the parade of coaches that have come through UMass since, to think that it's almost surprising that Calipari stayed as long as he did. So he's generally pretty well regarded here. Both of his daughters went to UMass for school, and I think that sent a message that he still had fondness for it. He still donates money to the library annually, and still will show up at times in Amherst for something. So I think for the most part, I think people like him.
It's interesting how the general feeling around him seems to have changed in the last few years. Like, I was always one to make a coach vacated joke. I probably still will at some point, because it's a funny line. But it almost feels like Cal has winning at Kentucky, and obviously helps. But it seems like as the environment around college sports and college basketball has changed, with kind of more an understanding of wow, players should probably be getting a piece of this, or that as kind of that understanding has grown, it almost feels like Calipari is kind of they're coming here for 1 year to play basketball because they have to come here for a year, so I'm gonna recruit the best players, and they're here to play basketball. And it just seems like, in a weird way, the environment around the sport kind of caught up with Calipari in a weird way.
I think that's a fair statement, and especially when Coach K started taking one and dones annually. And Coach K is so revered as this beacon of how you're supposed to do it, that it became harder to blame John Calipari for doing the same thing. And I think it became a problem with the system in people's minds, and less a problem with him. And I think when he won the championship and has been to a couple Final Fours with Kentucky, and there's been no controversy to go with it, I think that some of that has pushed his issues at UMass and Memphis further into the past. There are some people that will always look at him and think that he's a cheater and just not like him. But I think you're right. I think sort of the way college basketball has evolved, and I think too some of the coaches, you look at Roy Williams in the issues Carolina has had, Jim Boeheim. There are coaches that were once considered the antithesis of Calipari that have had their own problems, and somehow the people are blaming the system more than him.
So we talked a lot of college basketball, obviously, but you cover college football, college hockey. What else is on? What else am I missing here?
Those are the biggest. I mean,
Okay.
I work for a small newspaper in the college area. So if lacrosse is interesting in the spring, I'm covering lacrosse or softball things. But the primary parts of my job are football and basketball, and hockey would be slightly behind those. But those three would be the biggest, no question.
So what's your work schedule look like this time of year?
Yeah, from now until the end of football season, it's a little bit crazy, and I'm not quite as nuts about it as I used to before I had a kid, as far as some of the hours, and so now it's try to be smarter. I'm if I'm at a practice, most of the time I'll have a laptop or something too, because if I can write up some hockey at a basketball practice or the same. And in UMass football, as we mentioned before that we started, their media availability is really late at night, which allows me to get a lot of things done before time, which is helpful.
So I was wondering, like, because I've talked to other former beat writers like this about this, and like I would look back at my time as a beat writer in like 2003, 2004, and scandal time not counting, like normal beat time, I'd be like, I always felt I was really busy and had a lot to do, but I look back at like what I didn't have, responsibilities I didn't have, blogging, tweeting, live updating the web, and I was like, what the hell did I do with my life? Like, what was I doing at my job that I felt so busy at when I didn't have a Twitter, when I didn't have a blog?
You were on the internet waiting for pages to load because of how back then things weren't nearly as fast right in front of you, or you were at whatever antiquated computer system that your paper had at the time was working slowly. As technology has caught up, you've filled into things to be that much more busy.
That's probably true. So I'm wondering, you've been a beat writer for a while. Like, how is the job of beat writer? What has changed about it from back when you were covering Cal, aside from the technological, the obvious kind of technologies, but the actual job in reporting and writing, what's changed and how's the job changed?
I think it's probably changed for me a little bit less than some people because we're a one edition newspaper. So I still have a late deadline, which gives me a little bit more room to operate and do things. I think with Twitter and blogging and some of the I do take some post game video and things sometimes. I'm more likely to write 2 stories off of a game than 3, which I did when I was younger. Even sometimes when we were an afternoon paper many years ago, it would be even sometimes 4. But I think the biggest change is we touched on it before. I think the biggest change is Twitter. I think because you're not only public statements from somebody aren't always happening when they're happening in an interview situation, whether it's a player, whether it's a coach, whether administrator, whatever. You're kind of all the time monitoring what's happening. I mean, it drives my wife a little crazy that I have a lot of a lot of Twitter alerts for if certain people are tweeting. I'm getting my phone starts vibrating just to make sure. And I think the dialogue that you have with your readers has changed it on some level too, because I think the readers tend to feel like they know you more, and it's more it becomes Matt Vautour's coverage more than necessarily just the Daily Hampshire Gazette coverage for some people, because they have that access, and I think it's interesting, and it's good. It's good on some days. It's bad on others, but it's and I think, like anything, I think the need for everything to be immediate. I mean, it used to be blogging would be immediate, and then the story would be at the end of the day. But now it's just like technically there's a blog on our website for UMass stuff, and I do put smaller things on it, but really everything's a story now, and so there's a lot more shorter stories because I think people's attention spans for certain things are a little shorter, and you notice when you're writing something longer a lot more than maybe before.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've seen a lot in my own research and in the research that's being done on sports writing and in other journalism too, is really the blog has kind of gone away. Like the blog was this thing that we had, and there was a lot of research about it. But yeah, it quickly kind of became subsumed where, that was very quickly replaced with like, well, you're putting the game story up on the blog. Well, now you're just kind of putting it up online and on the main site. So there's not that weird separation anymore where like this is a blog and then I have my story coming after this or different.
I'd argue almost the other way. I
Really?
don't argue
Okay.
almost the newspaper has gone away,
Sure.
and
Okay.
everything's become the blog.
Okay.
In some ways, especially for online outlets.
Okay.
That I feel like the lines have blurred between what's opinion, what's analysis, and what's straight news for a lot of people. And I think I'm more traditional in that respect than some people, but I think that if you did a random sample of writing today versus, I don't know, 10 years ago, I think it probably all feels more like blogging in terms of the way people write. I think there's a lot more first person or things that feel like first person, even if they're not even if you're not using personal pronouns, even if you're not starting with I.
Right.
I think it feels that way.
Interesting. I guess I agree with you. I was kind of putting it. I was saying it poorly, but like that. I remember when, you blogged, I blogged on our job, and the blog was this separate thing that you did. Like you did, even if you were publishing it on Story, you were doing like a traditional game story and maybe a notebook and maybe a column or a game story and notebook. But then the blog was something else. I remember I used to, up until very recently, I would always quote you because I love the way you were one of the first writers who blogged regularly that I would read. And I loved your description of it, that you would think of you thought of your blog as the deleted scenes portion of the movie. And like I thought that was so perfect, but and thinking about it today, like that is such like a 2005 way of looking at blogs, isn't it?
I was trying to think of it too, like who has DVDs anymore? Like
right.
to finding those deleted scenes, you're looking for them on YouTube someplace now. I knew when you started to say it, I knew that's where you were going, and it's funny because at the time that's exactly what I was shooting for, and now if you said to somebody, they'd be like, "What are the deleted scenes? Where would you find deleted scenes?"
What's a DVD? Yeah. There's like 3 dated references in that one question alone. That was pretty impressive, I think. But no, it is so interesting to see how quickly, like, and how it, maybe you can answer this better than I can since I've been out of the actual day-to-day industry for so long, but it feels like that change was really organic. Like the blog came on and we were doing our blogging thing, and then it kind of like organically shifted away from blogging as this separate thing, and like, I don't know, did Twitter fill that void where it kind of like went from, what you would post on the blog became a couple tweets, and then you have your game story, and then that kind of gray middle area vanished?
I think it's probably a lot of things, because I think the way people consumed what they were reading has changed. That it's not that you're sitting down in front of your desktop or your laptop; you're getting it on your phone. So so something that would having a short story that might have been something for the blog or we all used to call our blogs the blog as if we had, like, the same way people refer to New York as the city.
Right.
It was this great proprietary thing, as if there was only one important one and it was ours. Everybody, I think I still do that with my podcast, the podcast.
Right.
But yeah, I think you're right. I think Twitter has taken some of that. I think the fact that things are online, the mobile versions of stories. I mean, the way we've all changed our websites to be more mobile friendly and it's kind of naturally. I think you're calling it organic is right. I think it's all just kind of flowed together, and I'm kind of fascinated to know what it looks like 10 years from now, what it looks like 15 years from now. And I'm always curious when I talk to tech people, and I haven't gotten a great answer. I wish I could reveal something for you here, but like, what do they think it's going to look like? What's the next thing? What is going to do to it what Twitter has done to it? What's the next wave?
Right. Well, we'll all be working for The Athletic at some point. So, so this is coming because you're a listener. But what's the best thing you've read lately?
Well, from book-wise, I'm reading The Mysterious Montague, which is a Lee Montville book, and that takes place in the 20s and in the Depression era. It's about a guy who I think it was Grantland Rice said was the best golfer he'd ever seen, but never entered a tournament.
Okay.
And refused to have his picture taken. And you can see as the book is going, there's a dark secret in his past, and I think people should read it. So I don't want to give it away. You can if you want to know more, read the book. But it's really good, and I like Lee Montville a lot. I think his storytelling is great as far as his ability to make a story both really informative and really fun. I think he's terrific, and so that's been really fun. I recently read something called in the New Yorker called "Where the Bodies Are Buried," and I want to mention it because it makes me sound that much more cultured and intelligent if I'm picking a story from the New Yorker, which I don't actually read all that regularly. But it was by Patrick, I think is Radden Keefe, and it's about it's connected to the Troubles in Northern Ireland.
Okay.
And it's about a family's quest to find out what happened to their mother who disappeared in the midst of all of that. And I've always found that history kind of fascinating because I've been to Ireland, and I've been to Belfast twice, and I've been to Dublin before, and both those areas look basically so much like areas that we've been to and we've lived in. Western Europe is similar to the U.S., and to picture that sort of strife in areas like where we live, it's hard to imagine. And so I've always been kind of fascinated by that, and I thought that was a really well done story on it.
And you do sound very cultured. I'll grant you that one.
Thank you.
I am in the middle of a long-awaited reread of All the President's Men. I've been holding on to this for a while, but it's been on my shelf for a while to reread. Of course, I read it years ago, and the movie is wonderful. But just rereading that is, for the times we live in and politically and everything, obviously it has a lot of meaning. But, just as a journalism story, just as a news gathering story, as a reporting story, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. It's so...
I agree, yeah. I'll say I've read it too, but I would say that's probably I would guess that 95% of the people you've had on this have read that at one point or another. And it's not only well done and the story's interesting, but it's such an inspiring tale of you want to do your job better after you read that.
It totally is. Like it's totally you read that book and you want to go out. I remember when the Bonaventure scandal was happening in 2003 was one of the last times I reread that book, and it was you reread that, and now you want to go out and like break news for like 6 days in a row or something like that. and I just love the, I'm watching Mindhunter on Netflix, which is a show based in 1977. So a few years after All the President's Men, but just that era of, and again, we talked a lot about blogs and social media, but that era of, this was a story that you took a day to work on, and that you didn't know what the other person, the New York Times, was going to have until midnight or whenever the story came out. And the pacing of that story and the pacing of the reporting is just, it's extra fascinating to watch from this moment in media time,
I think it would probably be a great assignment for a news writing class somewhere to have them read that book and then produce something on what it would have, how that story would have been different today. How would the reporting and how it would have come out differently today? I think that would be fascinating.
Well, if anybody's taking my class next semester in the spring, I'm totally stealing that assignment. So you can thank Matt for that. That's a good one. I like that a lot.
I'll be curious. You have to tell me what comes out of that. That sounds like that'd be really interesting.
Absolutely, Matt. If people are interested in reading you, where can they find you?
Well, my stuff is on gazettenet.com, and there's a UMass page where you can find most of my stuff. I'm on Twitter at Matt Vautour, VAUTOURDHG, which is for Daily Hampshire Gazette. So, and I'm pretty active on Twitter, so I'm pretty easy to find. Awesome.
Well, this was fun catching up, man. Appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. I feel a little bit ripped off that I didn't get to throw a pop culture nod toward David Ford. That's my obscure British musician obsession. Right. David Ford. If people are interested, he's really good. He's a lot of his music is political. That will feel relevant right now. So I'm not the only person that doesn't get to sneak a music reference in. David Ford.
David Ford. I actually had talk about West Wing on here, but we got in the A10 riff, and I couldn't figure out a way to bring it back. So I know you're a fellow West Wing phobe. Do you find yourself being drawn back to the show as much as I do in the past year?
I'm always in either a rewatch of the West Wing or the Newsroom. I've got one of them.
All right.
Whenever I want to have something on TV while I'm doing something in the background, I've got one of the two of them on. And West Wing, I'm a fan of both of them, but I'm a huge West Wing fan. Yeah. Much more so, to the point that I had a fantasy baseball team at one point named the Fargo Auto Kings. And if you're a West Wing fan, you know just how specifically nerdy you have to be to get that.
That is fantastic. The Fargo Auto Kings. That's fantastic. That is so good. Newsroom never did it for me. We watched about the first season, and I don't know. It didn't click with me. I don't know. I think it was the revisionist history of that show where they were like going back to all the real stories, but doing them like the way we should have covered them. And yeah, there's truth in it, but I don't know. When Aaron Sorkin starts getting into like modern technology and the internet, he tends to lose me. But West Wing is gold. There's nothing there.
Newsroom was not nearly as good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the characters. All the criticisms of it are fair, but it was sort of like, if you can't have new episodes of The West Wing, it was right. At least the dialogue reminded you of it.
Right. And so what impresses you? We'll talk West Wing for a minute. Why not? It's my podcast. We can do this. So as someone who writes for a living, I mean, what about, because I used to, when I needed inspiration to write or when I was stuck writing something in my newspaper days, it was the West Wing DVDs, again, with the old technology, but that's what I would put on. So what about the writing of West Wing? Specifically, kind of, what's magical about that for you?
I think the dialogue, and I think that's really what stands out in Sorkin's writing, as much as anything, because there are points in The West Wing that the story itself might feel a little contrived if done by a lesser writer, but you sort of subconsciously just overlook it because the dialogue is that good. And I think, and I don't have to write a whole lot of dialogue in what I'm doing, but I think the succinctness of it and finding his ability to get so much, not only information, but emotion and into small patches, or into small bits of dialogue, I think is valuable, and it feels like there's so much detail in it. I think that I would at some point I think I would like to see the scripts and read them just to see how many things are in there, because I feel like there are things in there that even somebody like me who's watched every episode 10 times or more, that I would probably have missed. in there and things. And I know sometimes when I'm writing, I'll have a line or the way I'll turn a phrase a little bit that I assume nobody is getting, but I'm enjoying doing it because it's just fun to write that way.
Yeah.
And so I think reading the West Wing, I think reading the scripts, I think would bring things out. And even writing that's not newspaper writing or journalism, I think is always just valuable to see. Like I've always said, and I haven't done it, but I'd like to at some point. I at some point want to write 3 minutes of an open mic night stand-up comedy thing. And I don't, for any stretch of the imagination, think that I am capable of being a stand-up comic. I don't.
Okay.
I just want to try it one time because I think it would be valuable to learn about the timing and the spacing and the wording on it. And I think that doing that would be valuable just for my own skills as a writer. And so I always say I'm going to do it, and at some point I would like to. But I think that's the same idea of reading the scripts that way to see the way things are put together. Because somewhere in the back of anyone's mind, you're going to file something away that'll be useful later.
And the dialogue and just like the depth of characters on that show. Like you think of like Mrs. Landingham, who's the president's secretary, is a fully formed character. Even like within the dialogue she and Bartlett will have very early on, the kind of repartee that they have, like all of a sudden this woman is a fully formed character, and she's what? 15th on the list of characters or something like that in terms of importance to the story, and of course she's such an important character, but like what they were able to do with Charlie, to bringing him in the middle of season 1 as like the body man for the president, and all of a sudden he becomes this again, fully formed character and relationships.
My dog is named after him, for whatever that's worth.
My dog is named Zoe, so there you go.
We should get them together. But yeah, in things like he'll have things like there'll be characters that will in their speech use malapropisms, like they'll and in the way that Aaron Sorkin's not making that mistake, but he's presenting it in such a way to show that this character, that's the type of mistake that Ed or Larry would make. And Ed or Larry are so minor, but but he's thought them through enough to know that they're somebody that would say a whole nother instead of a whole other.
Right.
And I think that's sort of, I think to have it all of those kind of things organized in your mind is impressive.
Yeah. So, all right, Matt. Well, you have availability to get to, so I will let you go to that. But again, thanks for taking the time. This was fun.
Thanks, Brian. Always good to catch up.